Nobody threw you a party for being okay. Nobody pulled you aside and said, "Well done, you got through another hard week." Nobody tracked your progress or made sure you felt seen in your own home. You just got through it, and then got up and did it again, and somehow, quietly, that became the whole template for how you move through the world. People who study generational psychology have started paying very close attention to the people born between 1965 and 1980. The generation sandwiched between the boomers, who rewrote culture, and the millennials, who were told they could be anything. The generation raised in the gap. They call you Generation X. And here is what they are finding. The way you were raised didn't just shape your habits. It rewired the architecture of how you think, how you attach, how you handle pain, and why you are, to this day, one of the most psychologically misunderstood generations alive. Stay with me, because what comes next might be the first time anyone has actually explained you back to yourself. You grew up in a house where the adults were busy being adults, not cruel, not absent in the dramatic cinematic sense, just occupied. Your parents had their own unprocessed weight to carry. Economic anxiety, shifting family structures, the quiet collapse of a lot of things people had been told would hold. And in the middle of all of that, there was you. You learned early that the adults around you were not a reliable source of emotional refueling, not because they didn't love you, many of them did, deeply, but because nobody had taught them how to refuel either. So you did what intelligent children always do. You adapted. You figured out how to self-soothe before anyone used that term. You learned to read the room, manage your own expectations, solve your own problems, and not make too much noise about the ones you couldn't solve. Developmental psychologists call this pattern emotional parentification, the subtle, common experience of a child who learns to disappear emotionally in order to make space for everyone else. In plain language, you learned that your needs were an inconvenience, and the fastest way to be loved was to not need very much at all. You didn't learn that as a philosophy. You learned it as a survival strategy, and your brain, efficient and loyal, turned it into a permanent operating system. And here is the part nobody says out loud. You are still running that operating system right now. You can hear it in the way you respond when someone asks if you need help. Fine, I've got it. You can feel it in the specific discomfort that rises when someone tries to take care of you, like wearing a coat that doesn't quite fit. That is not a personality quirk. That is a nervous system that was trained very early that depending on people is not entirely safe. You were also the first generation raised inside a culture of radical independence as an ideal. The latchkey generation, home alone at 10 years old, not as a crisis, but as a badge. You walked to school. You sorted out your own boredom, your own conflict, your own fears, and the world reflected that back as toughness, as something to be proud of. Psychologists who study resilience make an important distinction here. There is resilience that comes from being supported through difficulty, where a child learns they can survive hard things because someone was with them while they did. And there is resilience that comes from having no other option. Both produce people who can handle a crisis, but only one of them produces people who know how to rest afterward. And if you are Gen X, you are very good at the crisis, and not very practiced at the rest. There are 3 types of Gen X adults, and I want you to notice which one stops you and makes you think, that is exactly me. The first type carries a very quiet grief, not for something dramatic, for something smaller and harder to name. The childhood they almost had, the version where someone noticed when they were struggling, where praise wasn't rationed, where the standard wasn't simply getting through. These are the people who can sit in a room at 45 and suddenly feel something from 1987 they never felt when it happened, because back then, feeling it wasn't an option they had access to. Research in developmental psychology suggests the nervous system stores what the conscious mind was never allowed to process. It doesn't forget, it just waits. Sometimes it waits 30 years. If this is you, the person who can cry at a film but struggles to cry at their own life, you are not numb. You are not broken. You are someone who filed things away in a very deep drawer because the drawer was the only place available. The second type built a life on competence, the way other people build on connection. Extraordinarily good at their work. Dependable, self-directed, unfazed by pressure. And in their personal lives, they run the same program. the person everyone leans on, the one who holds things together, the one who deflects so naturally when asked how they are that they don't even notice they're doing it. Psychologists call this high-functioning avoidant attachment. In simple terms, your emotional strategy is performance. If you are useful enough, needed enough, then your presence is justified without ever having to be truly vulnerable. It is extraordinarily effective, and it is extraordinarily lonely, because the person everyone counts on is very hard for anyone to actually reach. You built the competence as armor so long ago that you have almost forgotten there is a person inside it. The third type made peace with all of it and became something genuinely rare. These are the Gen X adults who took the self-sufficiency they were handed as children and turned it into actual self-knowledge. Not the brittle independence of "I don't need anyone," but the calm, rooted clarity of "I know exactly who I am." They are not performing toughness. They have done the quiet, unglamorous work of understanding themselves, often without frameworks, often just through decades of honest attention. They have a quality that is very difficult to manufacture, a steadiness, a way of being present with other people's pain without flinching. Because they have already sat with their own, these are the people others instinctively turn to when things get real. And that is not an accident. That is what decades of quiet self-reliance can become when it is pointed in the right direction. Let me take you to one specific moment. You are somewhere between 8 and 13. An ordinary afternoon. No crisis. You are just in the house, in the yard, in your own head. And there is nobody checking on you. Not because something is wrong, just because that is how it is. So you do what you always do. You find something to do. You process whatever you are feeling by moving through it, not by naming it. And in that ordinary moment, something permanent got written into you. The lesson wasn't stated, it was absorbed. Through repetition, through atmosphere, through the slow accumulation of what is normal. The lesson was, you handle your own things. You do not wait to be rescued. You do not make your interior life someone else's responsibility. That lesson made you capable, clear-eyed, and genuinely hard to rattle. It also made intimacy complicated. Made rest feel like laziness. Made receiving care feel like a transaction you didn't know how to complete. You have been carrying both of those things, the gift and the cost, your entire adult life. Here is the distinction that matters most. There is self-sufficiency, and there is self-abandonment. From the outside, they look almost identical. Self-sufficiency is a skill, the genuine ability to function independently, to not fall apart when things get hard. You earned it, and it has served you. Self-abandonment is what happens when self-sufficiency becomes the only mode available. When you are so practiced at not needing anything that you have lost access to knowing what you need. When handling everything alone starts to cost you the ability to be truly known. One is a strength. The other is a strength that has quietly become a wall. The only question that matters is which one you are living in right now, not as a judgment, as an honest inventory. Because here is the truth about you, Gen X. You did not get the applause. You did not get the gold stars or the gentle narration of your own emotional landscape. You got independence handed to you before you asked for it, and you made something extraordinary out of it. You are not cold. You are not the generation that got left behind. You are the generation that learned at a very young age that the world did not pause for your feelings. And instead of being destroyed by that, you became someone who could move through almost anything. That is not a consolation prize. That is one of the quietest forms of strength that exists. But strength and closure are not the same thing. And you are allowed, genuinely allowed, to want both. Drop a comment and tell me, what is one thing you wish someone had said to you growing up that nobody did? I read every single one, and if this felt like a conversation you have been waiting to have, subscribe. Because the next video might explain exactly why the people raised to need the least are often the ones who feel the most deeply. You were never the forgotten generation. You were just the quiet one. And quiet was never the same thing as fine.